Good evening, and thank you very much for being here and allowing me to come and be a part of this very important forum. I would like to see this kind of thing happening all across our state. So I want to encourage you for what you're doing and ask you to reach out so that other communities will get this same vision that you have and learn about what's going on. Since I'm a Christian lobbyist in Albany, I want to talk about more about the legislative side of things. Let me quickly tell you, I have a display over on the right. I'll tell you what's over there. We are a Christian lobby group, statewide, grassroots. We're concerned about religious freedoms and liberties, family issues, moral issues. So this topic tonight is right in the middle of what we are. We're kind of the point opposition in Albany. We've put together a coalition of different groups that work with us on this. We put out a monthly newspaper called Freedoms Alert. The last 2 issues are over on the table, so help yourself to them. If you want to get the paper mailed every month, you got to fill out an envelope, and so I got your name and address. We'll send it to you. There's brochures about our ministry. We have an education arm and a lobbying arm, so pick those up. And we also have a business card. I call it my missionary prayer card. I left the pastor 27 years ago to go to Albany to represent the Lord Jesus Christ. We're concerned about impacting legislation that affects our churches and our families and the moral issues of our society, but we're also concerned about the legislators spiritually. So we try to influence legislation and legislators for the Lord Jesus Christ. Every Tuesday morning, we'll be doing it tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we have a legislative prayer breakfast and Bible study. They have to come into work an hour early. All the legislature and all the staff are invited to come and be a part of that. You never know who's going to show up, but we're trying to have a spiritual impact. I'm kind of the unofficial chaplain up there, get called on off and on to do counseling, that sort of thing with staff and with members of the legislature. So that's what we do, and so pick up our literature over there, and if you want to donate, that's good. We take cash, checks, and credit cards. All right, let's talk about the legislation. Governor Patterson announced about a month ago he was going to introduce same-sex marriage legislation. About a week or so later, he did. It was immediate. He cannot introduce the legislation. He can have it drafted, and when the governor drafts a bill, we call it a program bill. And so it'll be labeled on there, program bill, so everyone knows it originated from the governor's office. And that's what this one does. Then he has to get a sponsor in each house to sponsor his bill, or it will go nowhere. And so he got a sponsor in both houses. Both of them are openly avowed homosexuals. So that was not very difficult for him to find people to sponsor his bill. The Senate, I'll give you the numbers, because when you communicate with legislators, it's best if you give them the numbers. Then there's no confusion about what you're talking about. So in the Senate, it is Senate 4401. This is the bill. It's part of this side and that side. It's only about 3 paragraphs long. It's a very simple bill. It does alter the domestic relations laws. New York has a very strange definition of marriage. Marriage is called in the domestic relations laws, it deals with a husband, wife, or bride and groom. But those terms are not defined. And so whenever the legislature leaves terms undefined, you better look out. And we had a court case in 2006 when the highest court in the state, the Court of Appeals, ruled that even though the laws in New York did not say male, female, that when those laws were established in 1894, that nobody had ever heard of homosexual marriages or any kind of relationships like that, and so that it had to mean man and woman only, and therefore the court upheld that as being man and woman only, and said the legislature could change it if they disagreed. Well, that's what this legislation does. It attempts to change that definition. And so that is the Senate version. And also when a legislator introduces a bill, they put together what we call a memorandum of support, which is an explanation in English so everybody can understand it of what they intend to accomplish with the bill. And so there's a 3-page memorandum of support, much longer than the bill is itself. The bill's all in legal jargon. And then in the assembly version is 7732, and this is the memo on it. It's a pretty lengthy memo too, explaining what they hope to accomplish with this. Now the bill has a religious exemption. And if you contact your legislators and say, I'm concerned about the religious exemption, they say, well, there's one in there. Well, let me read it to you. It's only one sentence. And it says, provided that no clergyman, minister, or society for ethical culture leader shall be required to solemnize any marriage when acting in his or her capacity under this subdivision. So the only religious exemption in here is for clergy. Clergy are exempted from conducting homosexual marriages. But that's the only exemption. So nothing else is exempted from the impact of this legislation. And as the speaker before me talked about some of the things that will be affected, businesses and other Christian organizations, children's camps, those kinds of things that will all be affected by it. So we are very much concerned about it. Our main arguments are this: religious freedoms. It violates, infringes upon our religious freedoms. Second of all, it affects the future generations. It affects our children and those in the future, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, on down the road. It will change the total concept of marriage. Also, the state has no compelling interest in this. We asked some legislators today. This is interesting. It rarely happens, but my office was called last week by the Assembly Republicans and said, would you come in on Monday and brief us on this marriage issue, because we're going to be voting on it. And so a member of my staff and I briefed them this morning. The Catholic Conference joined us as well, and so they handled part of the briefing, and we went through all kinds of details, and I asked them, what is the compelling interest of government to push this legislation? Nobody could answer. So then I expect to hear you asking that question of the sponsors tomorrow. We do expect the bill will be voted on in the Assembly tomorrow. It will probably pass in the Assembly. 2 years ago, it was the first time it was introduced by Governor Spitzer at that time, and it did pass by 9 votes more than it needed. You have to have 76 votes to pass the bill in the Assembly. It had 85. We expect the number will be higher tomorrow. We're working to try to keep it from being higher. The reason I'm saying it'll probably be higher is because in the elections last year, they elected several more homosexuals to the Assembly. And so they naturally won't be voting against this bill. And so that's the battle we're in. We're just trying to get as many no votes as possible, but we don't expect to win it tomorrow. We just hope to have some good debate. We gave them lots of questions, a lot of debate material today, and so I just hope that they have the guts to stand up and put the sponsors on the spot and say, explain this to me. You know, really get some debate going on it. So that's our concern, is religious freedoms. Children are concerned, because when homosexual marriages are legal in the state, guess what the state public schools will do? They're going to teach that it is legal, that it's honorable, that it's acceptable, that it's just another lifestyle which is okay. And, you know, and your parents, you know, they're heterosexual, they're old folks. They don't know what's going on. They're not progressive enough, you know. So it's going to be, they're going to be attacked, and your children are just going to sit there and absorb it. And guess what they're going to do when they grow up? They're going to follow their teachers. Today we put out some position papers on, we took 10 common arguments in favor of same-sex marriage that the homosexuals put out, myths, we call them, and we answered every one of them and showed where they are all flawed. And so I have a few of these here that you can have, but it lists them like one argument is same-sex marriage is an issue of civil rights and fairness and not a moral issue. Yes, it is a moral issue. Marriage was established by God in the first part of the book of Genesis. Man